So, my favourite UK cinema chain, Cineworld, shut, which is great. Thanks 2020. Thanks pandemic. Honestly, I don't know what I'm actually going to do because I basically live in the cinema and now that it's shut, yeah. But before they shut, they did show all 6 of the Rocky films. I put in quotation because I count Creed 1 and 2 as Rocky films. Creed is the best Rocky film. I'll just say it right now. But I thought to myself, since I'd only seen the first 2 Rocky films and the previous 2 Creed films, I thought, why not just watch them all in the cinema? It'd be good fun. And so here I am now, just giving you guys my thoughts on the Rocky films, because why not? Now, Rocky 1 is iconic. It just is. I mean, it's this very small-scale, character-driven film that boosted Sylvester Stallone into superstardom. And it is good, but I will say it's definitely what I call a 1970s film. Now, what do I mean by a 1970s film? I basically coined this term as it's a film made in the 1970s that is very iconic, but its filmmaking just doesn't coincide with what we now see modern films to be. Specifically in the editing. Rocky and a lot of films around this decade, like the first Star Wars film and Superman the movie, suffer from really long takes. And what I mean by that is, the scene will just go on in probably one continuous take, maybe a couple of different angles of coverage, but the scene will kind of just linger and just keep going when it should have cut a good, 10, 15, 20 seconds before. And you can just see it a lot in this film with, Rocky kind of just walking down the street with like his, little strut, just walking around talking to people. And he's kind of just, bopping down the street, and that's kind of it. It's kind of just like, okay, I get it. He's walking home now. You can cut now. It's fine. But I mean, let's face it. The reason why this film is iconic is because of Sylvester Stallone's portrayal of Rocky Balboa. He created this character. He played this character. He basically owns this character. He is just Rocky. Rocky Balboa is just a very likable character. He's down on his luck. He's the underdog. He lives in a very poor part of town. He's charismatic and friendly, but he also just has a good heart, and he just wants to do the right thing. I mean, he's not the most intelligent of characters. I mean, heck, he even says it himself, he's not too smart. He's the kind of person who just talks a lot and just keeps on talking, even though he probably should have stopped talking a good, minute ago, but you just listen to him because he's very likable and charismatic. And his upbeat, optimistic aura is really great, especially with the scenes between him and Adrian, who is just the complete opposite with him. Their relationship is very sweet and very well written because they're essentially polar opposites that are attracted to each other, and then they sort of rub off on each other, which is just really great. The only downside to their relationship, I think, is just their kissing scenes are really weird. I don't know why, but the scene where they're in his apartment and they kind of start kissing and they kind of sink to the floor and stuff, it just looks weird. I don't know why. It just rubs me the wrong way. But aside from that, their relationship is very sweet. The scene with them in the ice rink is a very nice scene. Rocky is, being Rocky, just talking a lot, trying to get Adrian to open up. And she does a little bit. And you can tell that she does like him. She's just very sheltered and guarded because of the way Paulie has, treated her and abused her. But I love how that the more time she spends with Rocky and the more that he treats her with, kindness and warmth, that she sort of starts to open up more and starts to become way more confident. And that all builds up into the scene where Adrian finally stands up to Paulie and just yells at him, telling her that he can't do that to her anymore. He can't treat her like this anymore. It's a really fantastic scene, and it's just well written. You can't help but just watch that scene and feel just incredibly satisfied. Now that I've mentioned him, Paulie is a character that just really confuses me because I love him. Burt Young plays him fantastically, but he's a character where you kind of just look at him and you go, why is Rocky friends with him? He's a dickhead. He treats his sister like crap. He complains all the time. He whinges all the time. He's very selfish. Honestly, what does Rocky see in him? Now, I understand that Rocky is very loyal to his friends. That's kind of the whole point throughout the entire series. You see Rocky and Paulie kind of be as thick as thieves, even though Paulie does a lot of really horrific things. And Rocky just doesn't give up on him. But I mean, just by the end of it, you do kind of just wonder, why does Rocky hang out with him? Now, for me, one of the gems of this film is Carl Weathers as Apollo Creed. Apollo Creed is just fantastic. He's the greatest showman ever. He's just theatrical and upbeat and energetic, and you kind of just go, I love this guy. He's charismatic, he's just got this energy. He is basically a superstar personified. Now, as I've said before, the film is iconic. Everything from the montages to Bill Conti's fantastic score. I mean, Gonna Fly Now is just a wonderful piece of music. It's great workout fuel, it's great inspirational music, it's just iconic. Now, the build up to the fight is great. Rocky's just kind of doing the fight just to prove that he can go the distance, just to prove that he can at least achieve something in his life. And we get to the fight, and the fight is entertaining. Aside from the very cringe-inducing fact that none of them keep their guard up. It's so annoying. They all throw punches, and Apollo Creed takes punches to the face. Rocky takes 50 punches to the face. But he never keeps his guard up. it's really cringe-inducing, but it's entertaining. But overall, I think Rocky is a great film. It is. It's iconic for a reason. Yes, I think the film editing is slightly outdated, but aside from that, everything people say about it being iconic is true. It's just a really good, optimistic, motivational film. So Rocky 2 is the first one that is both written and directed by Sylvester Stallone. And I think Stallone directs all of them up until Rocky 5. Rocky 5, I think they bring back the original director, and then Stallone comes back for Rocky Balboa in 2000 and something. Now, I personally think that Rocky 2 is amazing. I think it's the second best Rocky film. Obviously, I think Creed is the best Rocky film. I know that sounds kind of paradoxical, but yeah, Creed is the best. Rocky 2 is the second best. Now, a thing that I really love about Rocky 2 is that it's very character-driven, similar to the first one, but it goes even further. I love how the film explores Rocky's rise to fame and how he deals with things like advertisers and commercials and how he can't read very well and so he's not very good at it. The thing that I really admire about Rocky 2 compared to the other Rocky sequels is that there is actual stakes, because during Rocky's fight with Apollo Creed, he injures his eye, and if he continues to fight, he could go blind in that one eye. And the possibility of that physical injury looming in the background really just adds stakes to this film, and I think the other Rocky films kind of just lose that. Because after this film, Rocky is essentially invincible. Now, let's talk about the main plot contrivance and issue people have with Rocky 2, which is the rematch. Because at the end of the first Rocky film, Apollo Creed says that there isn't going to be a rematch. But this movie's opening completely contradicts that and immediately just has Apollo Creed start crying for a rematch. And you know, the more I think about it, I think the film does justify why Apollo Creed decides he wants a rematch. A lot of the reasons why Apollo wants to fight Rocky again is due to pride and how people said that he didn't win the fight fairly. People thought it was rigged. And that starts to eat at Apollo. And that's one of the main character traits I love about Apollo Creed, is that he's very driven by pride. And because the film has scenes of Apollo Creed reading fan mail and hate mail and people saying that he's nothing more than a cheat and a coward and a liar, you can see it eat at him, and you sort of understand why he wants that rematch. And for me, one of my favorite moments that really humanizes Apollo Creed is when Rocky goes to see him after the fight, and he asks him straight up, "Did you give me your best?" And Apollo says, "Yes." I love that moment. I think that was just a very humanizing moment. It really just sort of reveals a layer to Apollo that he's not always that kind of prideful, eccentric showman. He does have a soul, and he is a person. Now, something I really appreciated this time around was the Adrian pregnancy coma subplot, and just the way it impacted Rocky and how it basically stopped him from training because he was so depressed and worried about his wife. I just found it very humanizing because, you know, when bad things happen to the people you love, it breaks your spirit, it breaks your soul, it kills your motivation. And I just found it to be a very relatable subplot. And probably my favorite moment in the entire film was when Adrian wakes up, looks at Rocky, and just tells him to win. It's one of the best moments because the score kicks in and it just gives you goosebumps. You're just like, yes, Rocky, go flip and win. And that leads on to the best training montage in the whole of the Rocky franchise. The Rocky 2 training montage is just the best one. Not only do you have Rocky chasing a chicken, not only do we get the return of Bill Conti's Gonna Fly Now, but the moment where Rocky is, you know, running down the street and you've got the kids of Philadelphia running behind him, and then Rocky just essentially switches gear and just sprints across the screen, outpacing everybody, runs up the steps. It's just so great and just so uplifting and motivational, and just you watch it and you go, yeah, okay, it's time to work out now. Now for me, Rocky 2 has the best final fight. Not because of choreography, because again, like in all the Rocky films, the choreography for the boxing matches are pretty bad because no one raises their guard. It's really annoying. But the reason why I love it so much is just because it's so damn tense. The whole film you think, oh damn it, Rocky's gonna lose because he's not been training. But that final montage kind of kicks you into gear, you think Rocky is ready. And the film just does a really good job of putting you in Rocky's corner, you want him to win. And so the moment where both Rocky and Apollo go down and they're both trying to get up, but Apollo falls down and Rocky manages to get up before the countdown and he wins the fight, it's just one of the greatest moments in cinema history. I love it so much. I remember the first time I watched it, I actually like screamed out loud because of like how into the fight I was. It was great. And to me, that's why I think Rocky 2 is the best Rocky film. Excluding Creed, because as I said before, Creed is the best Rocky film. Because the film just does such a good job of making you think that Rocky is going to lose, even though I know he's going to win. And for me, that's just one of the marks of a great film. You're still invested in the characters, even though you know what's going to happen. Right, so now let's move on to Rocky 3, which is essentially a Definitely a turning point for the franchise. It's the high of the tiger, it's the thrill of the fight, rising up to the challenge of our rivals. Now, to me, Rocky 3 is the most entertaining Rocky film. It's just so cheesy and over the top, and you've got the montages with the close-ups on Sylvester Stallone's thighs and Carl Weathers' thighs. It's just crazy. And not to mention, it has the best thing to ever happen to the Rocky franchise with Eye of the Tiger. Eye of the Tiger was such a blessing on this film because it just brings a whole new life to it. You've got the montage at the beginning with Eye of the Tiger playing, you've got the other montage with Eye of the Tiger playing, and then the film ends with Apollo and Rocky doing their little personal rematch, and then it ends with the freeze frame with Eye of the Tiger playing. It's such a great song, it just gets you pumped up, and you just want to go. You just want to do something, anything. So this film shows us Rocky at the height of his fame, and the one thing that immediately I didn't like was that they write out all of his injuries. No longer does he have the possibility of going blind because he fixed his face because of money. That just feels kind of cheap. Now, I get that it's because they want to tell the certain story of being at the top, then falling back down, and then rising back up to the top again. I know it's part of the story, but for me, it just feels kind of lazy. It takes out that sense of urgency and relatability and the dangers of being a fighter. Now, you could argue and say that they didn't write out Rocky's injuries because Mickey does tell Rocky that his current championship title matches were all fixed in order to make sure that he didn't get hurt. But, I mean, I don't know, the film doesn't really justify it because you see Rocky basically be nigh invincible for the rest of the franchise, especially in this film. The film doesn't really justify it visually. You see Rocky get beaten up by Mr. T. I don't remember his character's name, but he gets beaten up by Mr. T, and he's fine. He doesn't get brain damage, he doesn't go blind, he's fine. I mean, the only thing that kind of really happens is that, as Mickey puts it, he loses his hunger. He needs to get the eye of the tiger back. Now, speaking of Mickey, his death scene is really sad. Burgess Meredith was fantastic as Mickey. He's iconic as hell, and seeing him die was pretty sad. And I know that people do like to take the mick out of Sylvester Stallone's kind of blubbering sobs as Mickey dies. I personally thought it quite worked in the scene, but I can see how if you take it out of context, it does seem a bit, goofy and over the top and sort of funny. But to me, I thought it just worked in the moment and in the scene. It felt believable. Now, the Apollo and Rocky bromance is just fantastic. I love how Apollo kind of just comes out of his rut of just feeling irrelevant to kind of push Rocky to come back and become the champ. He mentors him. My only issue is that I wish there was more. This film is a little too short for my taste because there are definitely moments where you could have seen Rocky and Apollo bond a lot more. Because although they train together, they don't have that moment where kind of, Rocky breaks down and Apollo breaks down and they kind of bond. The film does give us that scene where he breaks down in front of Adrian, and it's a good scene, but I found the dialogue to be very on the nose. Stallone literally kind of on paper writes out, okay, this is the scene where Rocky breaks down and he expresses his feelings towards Adrian. I mean, I find this line here.
What's the truth, damn it?
I'm afraid, all right? You want to hear me say it? You want to break me down? All right, I'm afraid. For the first time in my life, I'm afraid.
Pretty on the nose. But at the end of the day, the film is incredibly fun. You've got Mr. T as the villain, who is quite hammy, but he's also very enjoyable. And the moment where he says, I pity the fool, that's just great. You've got the montage with Rocky and Apollo training, and it's great. And it also gives us the best freeze frame in cinematic history ever. I love this so much. And as I mentioned earlier, it gives us the best ending ever, where it's Rocky and Apollo doing their little one-on-one private rematch. They go for the punch, and freeze frame, cut to Eye of the Tiger. Yeah, that's just cinematic perfection. Done right there. Give this film all the Oscars. Phenomenal. And he's watching the sun with the eye. My voice is screwed. Eye of the Tiger. Now, to me, Rocky IV is an interesting one because I know that there are a lot of people who genuinely do love this film, and I also know that there's a lot of people who love this film ironically. I don't love this film. I like it. I think it's fine and enjoyable, but I'm not in that camp that goes, this movie is brilliant, it's the best Rocky film because it's so cheesy. I think the cheese in this one kind of ruins it, and it's just a bit samey. It's the same as every Rocky film, except for there's elements of the Cold War implemented into it, and it kind of ends in a way that Stallone is basically kind of verbally saying, I'm ending the Cold War with Rocky IV, and it's just bizarre. To me, the only real meaningful moment in Rocky IV was the death of Apollo Creed. At the end of the day, I love that Apollo Creed's hubris was that he needed to die in the ring. He needed his pride, he needed to die in action. And at the end of the day, that for me was my favourite bit, because it just helped to inform Creed 1 and 2 a bit more for me. Like, I'm glad I've seen this film because now I get the context for Apollo in Creed 1 and 2. But yeah, there are just elements in this movie that are just goofy, but not in the good Rocky 3 kind of goofy. Like, Paulie's like weird sex robot is kind of just jarring and out of nowhere. Like, it is funny, but when you kind of look at the Rocky films in this kind of grand spectrum, you kind of just go, really? There was like this weird like sex robot in the 1990s? Okay. You know, you've got the first one where, you know, you have Rocky kind of like hanging out around like railway tracks, and then you jump like, you know, almost like 11 years later and there's a sex robot or something. It's very strange. Now, in regards to Ivan Drago, I get why people like him. You know, he's got that Arnold Schwarzenegger type of Terminator energy about him. If he dies, he dies. Like, Dolph Lundgren is excellent. The thing that kind of just ruins Drago for me is just how insanely strong he is. It just breaks the entire believability of the Rocky franchise. Like, I know I had a problem with Rocky being able to be the heavyweight champion in Rocky 3, considering in Rocky 2 he had the possibility of going blind, but the fact that Drago can punch with the force of like 18,000 pounds or something was stupid, especially since Rocky gets hit to the face like a bajillion times. Like, how is Rocky still alive? It's just way too over the top and way too unbelievable. And whilst this film is full of montages, the one thing that it's just severely missing is the Rocky theme. They changed composer for this one, and I won't lie, I was definitely missing Gonna Fly Now. They kept Eye of the Tiger, which was great for the opening montage, but where's Gonna Fly Now? Gonna Fly Now is like the real, you know, heart and soul of the Rocky franchise, and it was just missing. That being said, the greatest thing to come out of this film for me was Rocky's leather jacket. Oh my god, I love that jacket so much. I kind of want it. It's just a thing of beauty. So now we've reached the dark stain of the Rocky franchise. The one that people go, yeah, this basically killed the franchise. Rocky V is a film that is fine. I mean, I don't think it's amazing. It's definitely the weakest Rocky film, but I don't hate it. I think part of the reason why I don't despise this film is that I sort of get what Sylvester Stallone was going for. He wanted to take Rocky back to its roots, you know, bring Rocky back into the streets of Philadelphia, back into the lower end of Philadelphia, make him more relatable instead of being, you know, this billionaire fighter. He wanted to sort of make Rocky the relatable everyman again, so he's kind of, you know, doing his thing where he struts down the street and he walks into the neighborhood and he recognizes people and he's the friendly guy around. I get that he sort of wanted to move the franchise forward by having Rocky train a younger protege fighter, and I think the premise works well on paper. I mean, heck, essentially it's the premise for Creed. The only problem is that it's just pretty poorly executed. The character of Tommy Gunn could have been great, but the only reason why he's just not that great is that we're not inside his head. We don't understand why he's making certain decisions. And because we're not really seeing the world of this movie through his perspective, he kind of just comes across as a punk who, you know, kind of just betrays Rocky even though Rocky showed him some immense kindness. Plus also, that haircut, man, like, how am I supposed to like a character with hair like that? I mean, I guess at the end of the day, you could say that the main theme for the film is loyalty. Rocky isn't too loyal and attentive towards his son, and how he shows loyalty to Tommy Gunn, who in turn doesn't return that loyalty and instead betrays him. And it also shows how Rocky is just way too loyal and way too lenient on Paulie, because essentially, Paulie is the reason why Rocky and his family have to go back and move into the lower, poorer areas of Philadelphia. And for me, I just don't understand why Rocky hangs out with Paulie. Paulie is an awful person. I mean, he literally takes Rocky's fortune, money that isn't even his, and he invests it in a really shady business deal and makes Rocky lose his entire fortune. I'm sorry, I get that Rocky is supposed to be very good-natured and very kind-hearted, but what Paulie did, in my opinion, was just way too far. I mean, if I was Rocky, I would just be like, Paulie, you're out of here. I'm sorry. I don't get why Rocky hangs out with him and keeps him around. Now, I know another plot point of contention that people really don't like about this film is Rocky Jr.'s sort of character arc and how he sort of goes through this rebellious teen phase. And yeah, I don't love it, but I also get where Stallone was coming from. I think his heart was in the right place. It's just poorly executed. I think the most interesting part about Rocky Jr.'s character arc was that sort of idea of coming from this sort of highborn place and being sort of thrust into this lower, more rougher neighborhood. And I think that's probably the best part of his character arc. But then when he starts going through his weird rebellious teen phase with the earring, I was kind of just like, don't like this. But the main reason why it just doesn't work is because it's a bit too cliche. You know, he gets beaten up by the bullies who steal his lunch money, goes to his dad to teach him self-defense, but his dad is too focused on Tommy Gunn, and so he starts training himself, and then he beats up the bullies, and then the bullies befriend him because he's now the big shot in school, and it's just, I don't know, it was just cliche. I also felt the villains in Rocky V were very, very irritating, specifically Washington Duke. He felt like Mr. T's character, but just a businessman. You know, he kept provoking Rocky into trying to get into a fight, but it just was really cartoony and dumb. Especially since, like, the big fight for this film is supposed to be, you know, Rocky and Tommy fighting in the street. Like, what happened? How did we go from Rocky 1 with this really good boxing match to just this random street fight? Like, the only thing that's memorable about the street fight is Rocky getting those sort of like flashes of Mickey going, "Get up, you son of a bitch!" And yeah, it's pretty clear why people regard this one as the low point of the Rocky franchise, because it's just not very good. Gonna fly, fly, fly. So now we get on to the last of the quote-unquote Rocky films with Rocky Balboa. And Sylvester Stallone is back to write and direct. And overall, I feel like Rocky Balboa is a fine film, but at the end of the day, it just feels like a throwback film. Now, Rocky's whole character arc about coming back to do one last fight just because he needs to do it just sort of feels like Sylvester Stallone inserted himself into the film. How he needed to just come back just to do one more Rocky film, just to end on a final last hurrah. But for me, the weakest part of the film is kind of just the plot and the main catalyst and reason for Rocky and the current heavyweight champion to fight. The main sort of motivation and hang up the antagonist has is that he doesn't like the fact that the press thinks he's not an authentic champion. And he's also annoyed by the fact that a computer simulation basically revealed that a Rocky Balboa in his prime versus the current day heavyweight champion would win. And I just think it's such a weird sort of plot contrivance to get the two of them to fight. Like, that has to be made up, right? There isn't a modern day computer simulation that pits up the current heavyweight champion against the fighter from the 80s in his prime, right? Because that's just really weird, and why would you do that? But with all that out of the way, I do like this film, and I think the main strength of this film is the character work done with Rocky. Him mourning the death of Adrian and sort of being stuck in this endless rut of kind of just mourning her is really touching. And him bumping into little Marie all grown up now and having her own child is really nice and tender, because to Rocky it just sort of gives him something to do to sort of just look out for the people that he's known and sort of just be useful again. Even though Rocky does own a respectable restaurant, I mean, I kind of wish that restaurant existed in real life. Like, I would love to go, especially if Rocky actually was a real life person and owned the place, because I feel like just, you know, sitting down and listening to his stories would just be really fun and engaging. I like how he takes interest in Marie's kid and tries to, you know, give him a better opportunity in life by making him come work at the restaurant and then getting her to work at the restaurant as well. And it just shows that at the end of the day, Rocky is just a really charming, nice, giving character. The one thing I found very weird about the Marie relationship was that they kiss. And I think it's a really weird and obligatory kiss that just doesn't need to happen. Especially since there's a point in the film where Rocky addresses that he's still not over Adrian and that Adrian was like his one true love. And the fact that him and Marie kissed before the fight was just weird. It didn't sit right with me. Now, there's something that I really did appreciate about this film, and it's that it handles Paulie in a very interesting way. The bits in the film where Rocky and Paulie just go around Philadelphia reminiscing about Adrian were really great. Especially in the bit where Paulie just sort of breaks down and goes, "Rocky, I can't do this anymore. You're stuck in the past. And I know you treated Adrian with respect and kindness. I was there, I saw it, but I didn't. I treated her poorly." I kind of just went, finally, we're giving Paulie some sort of redemption. I love that. But it's short-lived because throughout the rest of the film, he's kind of just there to be his regular self. That's sort of the only real moment of redemption we get for Paulie, and I wish we got a little bit more. There's also the relationship stuff between Rocky and Robert, Rocky Jr., and it's fine. It's a bit cliche. It's the whole, my father's this very famous figure and I'm his son and people expect great things out of me, but I'm just doing the best I can, but I'm not my father. And it wraps up in the typical fashion of, you know, they both accept each other for who they are at the end. They both reconnect and reconcile, and yeah, it's fine. There probably could have been a little bit more to explore, but for what the film does, it's serviceable. Like I said at the beginning, Rocky Balboa is just a throwback film. It's the same plot as the original Rocky, with some more character elements added in, showing us sort of the journey of Rocky throughout the decades. And as this type of throwback film goes, it's fine, it's serviceable. It brings back all the nostalgic iconography that you remember, brings back the Rocky theme, brings back the montages, it even brings back the classic Rocky boxing technique of not keeping your guard up. But as I was sitting in the cinema watching the credits roll, I just thought to myself, you could tell that the franchise had run out of steam. Before Creed, Sylvester Stallone had given everything he could give. You could just feel the fact that he didn't really know where else to take the franchise. And then along came Ryan Coogler and made Creed, and if you guys want me to talk about Creed, let me know in the comments, because I'd definitely be down to rewatch those two films, because I loved them when they came out, and they are just really great. But yeah, that's what I think of the Rocky franchise. Rocky as a franchise is beloved, and it's part of our pop culture, and I completely understand why. The films are just full of heart. Even with the bad ones, you could tell that Sylvester Stallone wanted to send a message out to the world with them. Whether it be ending the Cold War, whether it be the theme of loyalty and how you should always look out for your own, whether it be being trying your best and going the distance and giving it your all, he had something to say. And I think for me that's why this franchise is so beloved and it's stuck around in the pop culture for so long. It's because it has these really important messages to just tell the viewer. They're feel-good, inspirational films, and they're definitely a must-watch for those who are interested in film. But yeah, that's what I've got to say on the Rocky franchise. Let me know if you want that Creed video, because I'll definitely be down to do it. Like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Hit the notification bell down there. My social media links are also down in the description, so if you give them a look and a follow, that'd be very much appreciated. I also have a second channel where I make short films and vlogs, so if you want to give those a look, feel free to. And until we meet again, I'll see you guys next time.